there is righteousness in the heart, there is beauty in the character. When there is beauty in the character, there is harmony in the church. When there is harmony in the church, there is order in the nation. When there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. We are all public servants. Sometimes we get criticism from the people who serve. The prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, who tells us when we say the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow it. Where there is injury, where there is love, encourage. Where there is despair, where there is darkness, and where there is sadness, joy. O Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be considered as to consider, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternity. Let us ask God's blessing upon us. Lord, you alone are the source of every good gift, of the vast array of our universe, and the mystery of each human life. We praise you and we thank you for your great power and your tender, faithful love. Everything we are and everything we have is your gift. And after having created us, you have given us the greatest of all, your Son, Jesus Christ. Fill our minds with his truth and our hearts with his love, that in his spirit we may be bonded together in your community of faith, caring people. In the name and spirit of Jesus, be the office bearers of Fraser Council, commit action, be good stewards of the gift entrusted to us, share our time, our talent, our gifts, as an outward sign of the special we hold in Jesus, through Christ our Lord. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the
We appreciate you taking time to share your wisdom and your guidance. The next item we have is apologies. Now, know Mel because he was our disaster coordinator for several years. And in that time, he had the passion and enthusiasm that was very contagious. I had the privilege of working with Mel on a number of issues over the time of portfolios. And I can tell you that the respect that element has in the disaster management community throughout the state is second to none. We should be very proud of that, and his family should be very proud of that. Mel was very
unit in Talbot Street, which is just down the road from there, and I believe it's appropriate for me to leave the room when that discussion is happening. And also in it's confidential item 15.1, my family trust also owns a commercial property in Bazaar Street, which is immediately impacted by that motion, and I believe also that it would be appropriate that I leave the room for the discussion and debate on that matter.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. In relation to 10.3.1, the adoption of the master plans, I would, through an abundance of caution, declare a perceived conflict of interest in relation to the Point Vernon master plan, in that I know quite a number of people who reside in the vicinity of that master plan, and some I've known quite well for a long time. I don't believe that my knowledge of these various people, with, I might add, varying opinions on it, will impact my ability to judge the matter on its merits, so I propose to stay in the room and participate.
Any further declarations? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two perceived conflicts of interest that I would like to raise. One is item 15.1, which is a confidential item. That's the Bazaar Street works, as Councillor Madden has raised. My wife has a business in the Maryborough CBD. There's definitely no direct benefit to her business in relation to this item, and I'll stay in the room and vote on that matter. And item 15.5, which is in relation to the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct, a perceived conflict of interest that I'm patron of Granville Football Club. I intend to stay in the room and vote on the matter as well.
Acting Mayor.
I
I am also a patron of the Granville Sports Football Club, and like Councillor Sanderson, I will stay in the room for the vote on that matter.
Can I seek clarity on that? In every situation where an issue is raised around the sports precinct, I've declared a conflict when it relates to the actual project itself. But this is a budget item which conflicts don't, under my understanding under legislation, when dealing with a matter of budget or a variation to the budget, there is no conflict of interest.
I'm loath to give advice on conflicts of interest because it's something that ultimately it's a matter between the courts and local government. But generally speaking, you'd expect that would be that councils have an interest in common here because it is a budget. But where councils make a decision that potentially can be seen to provide a benefit to a group or organisation to which there is an association, my advice would be to quote Councillor Lewis, in the abundance of caution to declare a conflict. But ultimately it's a matter for councillors individually to determine.
Yeah, so the abundance of caution often sets out an abundance of confusion. So in that respect, I'm worried that that every time we discuss a budget item, that we'll then have to turn our mind to it as well. Having said that, for the purpose of the record, under item 15.5, I previously declared that I am the president of the Kwungan Sandy Straits Jets. I withdraw that perceived conflict because I managed to get out of that role. That was so I'm no longer the president of the Kwungan Sandy Straits Jets, but I am still the president of Football Queensland Wide Bay. I declare a perceived conflict because there is no discussion around tenure of the precinct, but it's just the development of the precinct at this stage, and it's a precinct that will serve the entire community, an array of sports, which I've always supported and will continue to support. But on the basis of my perceived conflict, I will indicate that I intend to stay in the room and I'll vote on the matter, particularly considering it is a budget item.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Acting Mayor, I'd like to put a perceived conflict of interest in on 15.8 on rural residential land strategy. I'm actually a landowner just outside the 5 kilometre zone, but I'd just like to put a perceived conflict because it won't change anything that I'm actually doing. Thank you.
And I would also...
Well done.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I would also like to declare a perceived conflict of interest due to the various involvements with a number of supporting organisations that will be users, or end users of the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. There's no benefit for me, but yeah, there is benefit for them, I suppose, because I'll no doubt end up volunteering at their events out there.
Declarations of interest? No, we'll move on to item number 4, mayoral minutes. There are no mayoral minutes. Item number 5.1 is the confirmation of minutes of the January meeting. That's on pages 5 to 20. Is there somebody to move that the minutes be accepted as true and correct? Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Hanson. Did you wish to speak? No. Councillor Hanson, no. Any comment? No. I move that the minutes be accepted. I move the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is for the CEO. Item 6.1, public participation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's my duty to provide Council with a brief verbal report in terms of public participation. There are 7 members of the public that participated in the session this morning. The first one was Mr Grant Williams from Urbis, who spoke on the Optus communication tower extension. He wanted councillors to know that the 5-metre extension would accommodate Optus and Telstra communications, and that these allowing them to be centrally located and potentially avoid the need for further towers. And he also wanted to bring the council's attention to the community engagement process that his company followed. The second participant was Carolyn Packer. Carolyn wanted to thank the council for the work that they've done over the last few years. She wanted to apologise on behalf of Cliff Thomas in relation to his speech on de-amalgamation that was subject of previous public participation. She also wanted councillors to recognise that petitions are an important tool to gauge community sentiment, and felt that the cost estimates provided to her in relation to conducting a poll for de-amalgamation were overstated and could be potentially cheaper if conducted as part of a mayoral by-election. And finally, she felt that and was concerned that Maryborough is losing its identity as a heritage city. The next participant was Jenny Elliott. Jenny was speaking on behalf of and in support of the Maryborough Military Aviation Museum. She outlined a proposal for the Military Aviation Museum, including proposed exhibitions and the potential economic impact that the lease would provide. She also made councillors aware of the significant military aviation history associated with the Maryborough region and the airport. The next speaker, Mr Mayor, Acting Mayor, was Gemma Tennant. Gemma is the school captain of Maryborough State High. She wanted to raise her concerns on behalf of herself and her other students regarding traffic safety for students crossing Kent Street, and brought the council's attention to the fact that there are over 700 students, many of which have to cross Kent Street multiple times a day. Her main concerns were the width of the pedestrian refuge in the middle of Kent Street, the inadequate parking and bus lanes next to the school, and driver behaviour and speeding. Gemma outlined a range of options and by council as a matter of priority. The next speaker was Mr Graham Woad, who had 3 issues. His first issue, Coast Regional Council should review its policy in Australia Day awards to ensure that not only do we announce the winner, but we also announce the nominees and give the nominees recognition for the contribution that they've made to this community, and requested that we do that as part this year. His second issue was in relation to a drainage problem in Tiger Street that he first raised with council on the 8th of February, and he thanked Councillor Chapman for attending a meeting on site and requested that the matter be dealt with as a matter of priority. And the third issue that Mr Woad raised was in relation to the National Colour Code flood warning system, and he advised councillors that he received a letter from the National Manager for Disaster Information, and that his suggestion in relation to a National Colour Code flood warning system is being considered. The next speaker, Mr Acting Mayor, was our former Mayor, Mr Chris Loft. Chris talked about how political ambition can lead to corruption. He felt that political ambition of councillors has taken away the focus on doing what is right. He advised of his appeal of the Minister's decision to dismiss him. He indicated that he intends to return as Mayor of Fraser Coast Regional Council, and thank you for keeping his seat warm. The final presenter, Mr Acting Mayor, was Lee Dale. Lee wanted to voice her objection to the telecommunications facility at Craignish, and she was mostly concerned about the radiation's impact on residents' health. Mr Acting Mayor, that's a summary of public participation.
Do we need to move a motion to accept that anyway? Yep. Can I have a mover that that summary be accepted? Councillor Everard, seconded Councillor Mattern. Did you want to just speak to that, councillors? Any comment? All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 7, deputations. There aren't any deputations. Item 8, petitions. Do any councillors have a petition to table? No? Item 9.1, committees and delegates reports. This is pages 21 to 27, the advisory committee meeting minutes for the Wide Bay Water and Waste Services. There is a recommendation on page 21 that they be accepted. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Mattern?
Yes, Mr Acting Mayor, I move that the officer's recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Taylor? Yeah. Did you wish to speak to it? Are there any comments? All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is pages 28 to 43, item 10.1.1, the open resolutions register. So this has a recommendation that it be received and noted on page 28. Is there a mover for that? Yeah, Councillor Light? Yeah, seconded by Councillor Truscott. Did you wish to speak to the register? Yes, Councillor
Just
Truscott.
as a point of note, I think there was an updated one that came out. The one that is in the actual hard copy is an old version.
Mm-hmm. Were there any questions about the open resolution register, any of the items? No? All right. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is pages 44 to 75, item 10.1.2, the organisational performance report for January 2018. And this recommendation is on page 44, that the council notes the report in compliance with section 204 of the regulation. Is there a mover? Councillor Light, seconded by Councillor Chapman. Did you wish to speak to it, Councillor Light? No? Any comment or questions for the CEO? No? All right, moving to this. All right, all in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.1.3. This is page 76 to 110, the quarterly report on the implementation of the council's operational plan. And the recommendation is on page 76. That it be received and noted. Councillor Mattern moves, seconded by Councillor Light. Did you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mattern? No? Any questions on the document? Are you speaking for or against? All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. The next item is item 10.2, the lease of Orchid Beach, Fraser Island, page 111 to page 114. Councillor Everard's moving the recommendation that runs over page 111 to 112. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Chapman. Did you wish to speak? Yeah, Councillor Chapman. No. Were there any questions of the officers on the report? No. So I move that the officer's recommendation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Everard does. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Is this one all right? Is this what I'm meant to do it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, the next item is 10.2.2, council remuneration for the 2018 to 2019 financial year. This is pages 115 to 136. Yep.
Just for clarity, my understanding was the legislation was changed that this would not be required to be voted by council to endorse the tribunal's recommendation, that if it, but it would just lapse. I'm just trying to understand why, in this case, would bring it to council.
Just thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Taylor. There is no requirement for the remuneration to come to council for the council to make a determination to accept the recommendation of the tribunal. If it doesn't come to council, then the recommendation is put into effect. We discussed this and discussed this with the Acting Mayor, whether it should come to council or not, and it was determined that we should bring it to council because there may be some councils that want to not accept the recommendation, accept a lesser amount, or have a different view in terms of remuneration. It is the recommendation of the tribunal that it be increased by 2.25%, and it's up to the council to determine whether they want to accept that increase or not.
So the officer's recommendation is that the council adopts a general increase of 2.25% to existing remuneration levels payable to mayors, deputy mayors and councillors for the period 1 July 2018 to 30 July 2019 as published in the Gazette. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Light. Seconded. Is there a seconder? Councillor Maddern. Did you wish to speak to it?
Acting Mayor, this is always a bit of a poisonous challenge, voting or actually moving this motion. But obviously the tribunal has set parameters that they've carefully considered, and I don't think I need to say any more because I'm sure whatever I say will be it could be misquoted in some way. But we've got to recognise the recommendations of the tribunal. There is, even though inflation is quite low, there is still inflation and cost pressures on every sector. And we do want to also, in long term, attract people to this role. And I think that we've got to maintain that certain levels to make sure that we always attract people that have got the skills and the passion to do this job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. For. Yeah, yep. No, I accept the fact that the tribunal set this amount. But if any councillors feel uneasy accepting the pay rise, they can always donate to charity, which some of us have done in the past, and it's always a good way to give back to the community.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I think it's a great initiative, this project. As we heard from Jenny Elliott this morning speaking on the project, it's really got good legs. This project was founded, as she mentioned, in November 2016, and I've had the privilege of working with the group in getting it to this point, and I thank them for their tireless effort as their volunteers doing it, and I thank the staff as well for bringing it to this point as well. I really think there's great potential. As she mentioned, military history, tourism is really taking off, and I think there's always been in the master plan the project of having a museum at the Maryborough Airport, and I think something of this significance that will acknowledge and pay respect to the military aviation and the proud history that Maryborough has in connection with it. So I look forward to being able to continue to work with this group and seeing this come to fruition. There's even hopes that I understand that they've applied to get some of the City Hall floor when we remove that, so it'd be great if we can see a second life out of that out there. And as Jenny mentioned, having the old look of a P1 hut on the outside with quite a modern feel on the inside as well. And there's much to acknowledge there, and so I really look forward to a progressive future with this.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. Yeah, look, this is a very important piece and an even more important jigsaw puzzle. I think you know, military tourism, military history it's a growing business right around the world, and to have something like this to fit in here on the Fraser Coast, it's just something that's going to serve us well. And yeah, I've been saying it for quite a while that the tourism future of the Fraser Coast is in Maryborough's past, and I think this will just another great step forward, and the more the merrier when it comes to our military trail. So congratulations, Jenny and team.
Were there any speakers opposed to the motion? Any speakers in favour of it? Yeah, Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Acting Mayor, I'd just like to speak on this motion that I'm for it because it's another community up project. This region is really renowned for it, like the Bopple Museum, how the community got behind that to build a museum, the Duncan Chapman statue, and now we've got the aviation, and there's many more of them in this region, how the community come forward and get the ideas. But not only it's the community, it's the businesses within the region, because they've already had support from major businesses who are major employers within this area. So I think it's great, and wish them all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any further comments or questions to the officers? Councillor Sanderson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to echo what Councillor Chapman has said, I mean, I think Jenny and her team have followed an incredible process, very professional, and just wanted to make that on public record that the way they have taken this forward, many community groups could learn from. So, thank you.
Next item is 10.2.5, telecommunications lease Puna, pages 145 to 148. The officer's recommendation is on page 145. Is there somebody that indicates they wish to move that? Councillor Madden?
Mr Mayor, I'll move that officer's recommendation.
And seconded by Councillor Chapman. Do you wish to speak to it?
Just to add that this is an additional element to an approval that has already been granted, so it's to be in conjunction with NBN. And I note that our Council Development Services officers have indicated that there will be a need for NBN to apply for some minor changes to recognise the additional plant and equipment that's going on there. But I think it's of value when you're putting two elements together instead of two separate facilities. So on that basis, I support it.
Councillor Chapman? Yeah. Anybody speaking against the motion? Anybody speaking for it? Councillor Light?
Yeah, it's really more of a question. Sorry, just to clarify. So there is no, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'd like to clarify. There's no existing tower there at this point? No. Can I ask someone? Sorry. There is no, this is a totally new tower. Just want to clarify, just want to confirm that it's a new tower.
There is an existing
permit, yeah, but not the structure.
This is an extension of that. The extension really relates to what's on the ground. So the advice that's been given by the planning officers is that they need to install another equipment shelter on the ground at the base of the tower. And there will be additional areas on the existing tower with no increase in size of the tower. But that will be a minor variation to the approval because it will change.
So I just have some more questions. So what's the, and again, just for clarity, and I just want to make sure that the nearest, what's the nearest resident to this tower, residential?
Mr Mayor, this is the tower that's located in Poona at the recreational reserve, of the tower. So this is for the necessary to actually work. So the road probably in the order of 80 metres, 50. I'd have to take that question on notice.
I have no further questions.
Anybody wish to speak for or against it, or questions for the officers? In that case, I'll put seconded by Councillor Chapman. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item 6, the delegations register. Council to CEO, pages 149 to 233. And yes?
The CEO, to the delegations around on page 100, Energy Resources Common Provisions Act 14. There's certain delegations there, and I just want to clarify, those powers relate to council-controlled land, not to individual or private property. When you talk about power as a public land authority to agree in writing to a longer period of entry, that's referring, I'm assuming, and we can take this on notice, happy, but I'm assuming that relates to where the state government requests access to do an exploratory search on council land, not on private land, that you have the delegated authority to allow that to occur. And if that's the case, is that something this council is happy to leave as a delegated authority or to bring back to council?
Thank you. Through the chair, I can confirm that relates to public land, so council controlled or owned land.
To extend that, say for example there is a piece of land, be it the koala habitat out near Tanana, which is council controlled. I'm just using the most extreme version. That the CEO would have a delegation to allow exploratory services to go on there. Is that? And I probably should have raised this earlier, and I do apologise. I'm happy to discuss this moving forward further. I'm just trying to understand the process.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Thanks for the questions, Councillor Taylor. Good question. I have a wide range of delegated powers that have been provided to me by this council previously. My general rule is that notwithstanding that delegated powers, and you've all been witness of the fact that in some cases, notwithstanding I have delegated authority, I bring matters that I believe there to be of significant concern to the public, concern to the council or the community. I bring those matters back to the council. I think there needs to be some level of trust in terms of my exercise of those powers and my ability to discern what matters need to come back to council because of public interest. The scenario that you posted, that you painted in relation to exploration in the koala habitat, I could guarantee you that would definitely be one that would come back to the council. It's very difficult when you're looking at delegated authorities to foresee every possible scenario, and I think that would be an extreme type scenario. Ultimately, it's up to the council if they want to provide those delegated powers, but I think any CEO that's worth their salt would ensure that, notwithstanding the delegated powers they have, matters of public or community interest or concern would be brought back to council for their consideration.
Do you have any further questions, Councillor Taylor? I will need a mover for this motion, which stretches over 149 and 150. Is there a mover for the officer's recommendation? Yeah, Councillor Light, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Do you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll just make one comment for the benefit perhaps of the public as much as anything. There are a vast number of pieces of legislation which require the council to take some action or other, including, for instance, the power to give the owner of a regulated pool to show cause notice. and the power to inspect a pool if there's a notice received and so on. These are matters which are traditionally delegated to the CEO, because we'd be here till well after dinner if we had to deal with every one of those. One of the benefits of being a member of the LGAQ is that the LGAQ engages their lawyers at their expense to comb through all of the changes to legislation as they occur, because when they do occur, the delegations change. And so this, this table that we're looking at is prepared by the LGAQ's lawyers and provided to us in effect at no extra fee other than our membership. Some poor young lawyer, or perhaps article clerk, has spent probably weeks combing through all this legislation, dragging out all of these pieces of legislation and providing them for our benefit. Not that we're likely to sort of need to know, but we need to comply if the issue ever arises, and that's what it's about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lewis. Is there anybody speaking against the motion? Any further people speaking for it, or questions? In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.7, corporate gifts, promotional items and giveaways, and that's pages 234 to 241. Yeah, moved by Councillor Light, seconded by Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's very important that we need to recognise this type of avenue to having appropriate corporate gifts and promotional items, particularly when we're having guests from city sisters and being recently overseas to China and receiving gifts of a standard that is quite exceptional. And I'm not saying for 1 minute that we should be spending an extraordinary amount of money on it, but we can be prudent and also logical in the sense of the gifts that we can have and offer to these people that also relate to the region and relate to a number of other things. It is important, and experiencing what happened overseas recently, I think it's a need to go down this path.
Thank you. Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I agree with Councillor Light's comments. I think it's very important that we judge each situation on its merits and the appropriateness of it, and some situations will require different levels of gifts, and this allows for that. And so I thank the CEO and staff for bringing this through, and yeah, happy to support this motion.
Are there any speakers against? Any questions? Yep.
I've probably used up all my questions, but just in relation to page 237, it does state there, and I understand the intent of the actual policy was to have more meaningful gifts, but it does say that the corporate gift should display the corporate logo, and I'm not sure that is always going to. It can't, if it's, for example, Indigenous artwork, you wouldn't put your corporate logo on. So where practical, I think should be the.
We said this.
Sorry.
We discussed it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We actually had discussed this with councillors in the past. Exactly the same matter was brought up. Should is not mandatory, and obviously when we read should, it reads, in my mind, it is where practicable. Obviously, if we're giving Indigenous art, we don't want to throw Fraser Coast Regional Council logo on there, or a piece of art, or any piece of artwork. We don't want to deface by sticking rubber stamping our logo on there. So, you know, the reason and practicality will govern the appropriateness of a logo.
Are there any further councillors speaking in favour? In that case, any further questions? Councillor Chapman.
Mr Mayor, I wonder if we move an amendment there where it said gifts should, and we just add the words where practical in there. That would read gifts where practical should, and then that would be any clarification from here on in.
Sorry, I think should is really, to me, that's, as the CEO said, it means where it's practical. And I trust the CEO and the senior executive to appropriately include the logo where it's feasible and not.
Thank you, Mayor. What I'm looking at now is, around the table here today, is we've got the definition of should, but down the track
if someone else reads it and they're not quite sure. It has been brought up, and I just think that the two words "where practical" clarifies that for future time.
Comment?
Yeah, the should actually does have a legal definition, which is bound by common law, which has been around for 100 years. It is not must. So, you know, I have no objection to the words being added, but I don't think wordsmithing the policy is really going to add any value. I mean, the bounds of reason and practicality will determine whether or not we use a logo or not. And I think it really entirely, you know, I couldn't see any reasonable officer ever making a decision to stick a logo on a piece of art that we're buying. That money relates to what I call trinket-type gifts. That might be a keychain or a set of champagne flutes or something like that. So I think that the policy speaks for itself, but I have no objection if that's what the council wants to do. But in accordance with the standing orders, it's the person that moved the motion that needs to determine whether he's happy for that amendment, and if he's not happy, then we need to move on, Mr. Acting Mayor.
As I understand it, the mover and the seconder don't wish to amend it. Are you happy? Are you happy with that, Councillor Chapman? I mean, you do have the option of moving an amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the matter's been moved and seconded. The request to amend the motion has been denied by the mover and seconder. So Councillor Chapman would have to move an alternative, foreshadow an alternative motion.
No, to the mayor.
Oh, no,
and
it
to the
doesn't. It doesn't actually. No, it
to
doesn't.
the mayor and the CEO is the mover. I'll concede to for the
Well, no, it's
sake of
actually been
business
dealt
moving
with.
forward.
It's actually been dealt with. The mover and seconder have said that they don't support it, so it's been dealt with.
The reason you'd foreshadow is if it's
Substantially changing.
if it
So
negates the
I'll
actual-
read the standing orders. Only one motion or one proposed amendment to a motion may be put before a meeting of the council at any one time. Where the mover and seconder agree to a proposed amendment, the amendment becomes part of the original motion without the requirement for the amendment to be put, so it would need to be voted upon. So put it back to council, the mover and seconder, whether they agree. If they do agree, it can be amended. If they don't, the motion would have to be put.
I consider it for the sake of business moving on a trivial matter. I agree with it.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. So this would add a third clause to the, a second clause to the recommendation, that actually amending the policy, is that right? This is, where is the should? 237, so you'd have to insert, because the motion has to say what you're doing to the policy. So there would have to be a second clause that after the word should, you would have to insert comma, wherever practicable, comma. Is that, I still haven't found it in the policy, but.
Could you point us to the page number and paragraph number?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you got that motion now, Marlene? Okay. Any further speakers for or against the amended motion? You right? Okay. I'll put it. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. All right, the next item is item 10.3.1, Parks Master Plans for Council Adoption, and this is pages 242 to 259. So I understand there is an alternative motion. I mean, is this, Councillor Everard, you're moving a motion?
Yes, yeah, I would like to move that motion.
Can you read it out? Yeah.
Yep. Council defer the adoption of the master plans to allow for a workshop between councillors and staff to further consider these options. Is the alternate motion.
Yeah. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lewis? Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Everard?
Look, yeah, thank you, Acting Mayor. Look, I just think this is an area that I think we need to all sit down with our staff, councillors and staff, and sit down and just go through the options and have a bit of good, robust discussion about the future of our parks on the Fraser Coast.
Councillor Lewis, as a seconder?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, I've had a number of representations made to me, and I think this would allow the possibility of teasing out those with a bit more time to devote to the issue, and then the matter can come back before the council once we've arrived at some sort of consensus. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the officers on this matter? Anybody wishing to speak against the new motion or in favour of it? Otherwise, I'll put it. All in favour? Carried. Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.2, membership of the Council's Environmental Advisory Group. That's pages 260 to 264. You're moving this, Councillor Lewis. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hanson. Do you wish to speak to this?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, very briefly, the membership of the Environment Advisory Group was set up pursuant to a resolution in 2016, and as set out in the report, apart from council members, the members of the Wildlife Preservation Society of Queensland Fraser Coast Branch, Wide Bay Burnett Environment Council, Wildlife Rescue Fraser Coast, and one other community member selected through an expression of interest. The group's been functioning very well, but we have had representations from the Mary River Catchment Coordinating Committee and from Burnett Mary Regional Group seeking that they be able to participate in the group. Both of those groups are very high level groups with considerable expertise in the fields that this advisory group deals with. The feeling among the advisory group itself is that their input would be a terrific benefit to the council, and we don't feel that it's expanding the numbers to any degree that's going to be relevant in terms of workability. So the advisory group seeks it, and certainly I'm recommending it, and would trust the council would support it.
Councillor Hanson is seconder. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. I think it's a common sense addition. Both the MRCCC and the BMRG are very much major players within the region, particularly with landholders, and we need to engage the landholders much more when it comes to the environment. So, yeah, wholly support, makes a lot of sense.
Any further speakers or questions? Otherwise, I put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.3, public exhibition of park master plans. This is pages 265 to 274. Different parks to the ones we were speaking about 3 minutes ago. Yeah. The officer's recommendation is over 265 to 266. Move Councillor Light, seconded Councillor Chapman. Did you wish to speak to it as mover? Yeah. Councillor Chapman?
Just quickly, Mr Mayor, yes, I think this is great to put out to the community to put their input back in, and I just urge the community to have a look over these plans and come forward with what their ideas are and what their thoughts. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Light.
Sorry about that, Acting Mayor. Just one comment, if I can pass on some views in terms of Sunsafe. There's been a number of parks, communities that have parks in them, asking about shade protection. We do live in a very harsh environment with high rates of skin cancer, and it's something that I think that this council should be looking at, and I think we are looking at it, but it can be a focus in terms of covering some of these playground areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion, moved by Councillor Light, seconded by Councillor Chapman. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.4, the development application ROL 173010, reconfiguring one lot into 89 lots. And this is pages 275 to 289. I understand there is, yes? Oh, yeah, sorry, yep. Let the record show Councillor Mattern has left the room. So the officer's recommendation is on pages 276, but I understand there is an alternate motion.
Yes, Mr Mayor, sorry, I've got papers everywhere, yes. My apologies. I'd like to put the alternative motion that the report be deferred to enable officers to have further discussions with the applicant regarding rates, issues and conditions.
Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Light?
Except that we need more time, and obviously officers need more time to consider a number of matters.
Councillor Everard?
Yeah, look, there's a number of concerns that need to be addressed there, and especially around that rating. I think it's going to be a very complex beast for our officers to interpret, and I would like to make my decision based on the right information. Thanks.
I just have a question for the CEO. Given that this is a development application and we're moving a different resolution to the officer's recommendation, is there any, there's no further steps we need to take?
I think Councillor Light's resolution captured the reasons for the difference in the resolution. We can make sure that that's articulated clearly in the minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm not aware of any other steps that need to be taken. I'll defer to the Director.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. The recommendation is just to defer the application, not refuse it. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'll be voting for this, to defer this, because I just think the applicant needs the opportunity to make sure that they know exactly what's happening with the rate side of it, and which was brought up at our briefing the other day, and I think that everyone should know before we approve something that they should be well aware of what's happening. Thank you.
Any further speakers or questions? In that case, I'll put the alternate motion moved by Councillor Light, seconded by Councillor Everard. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is another development application, item 10.3.5, material change of use telecommunications facility. And this is pages 290 to 309. Yes, Councillor Chapman, you wish to move this?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I wish to move this motion.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Maddern. Yeah. You wish to speak to it? Councillor Chapman?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I know that we've had people talking today about not, they don't want it in their backyard and things like this, but with communications, we've got problems in the Harvey Bay at the moment with communications with our mobile phones, and this is just something that's going to, that we've just got to move forward with. They're putting another 5 metres on the top, but when you actually look at the photo of before and the photo of after, they've demonstrated that the radiation is lower than 70%. I think it was lower than what required. They're just putting 5 metres, 75 times less than was required. They're just putting 5 metres on the top and beefing the structure up, so I do vote for it.
Councillor Maddern, do you wish to speak as seconder?
Yes, Mr Mayor, Acting Mayor, I know one of the concerns is radiation, but I also look at the percentage of the allowable legal limit, which has been determined as being safe by authorities outside of us. I mean, I've got no capacity to determine whether it's appropriate or not, but I'm sure the people that have put it together do. So it's a very, very small percentage. The visual issue of 5 metres higher, yeah. I think ultimately this is one of those difficult decisions that you have to make. While some people are negatively impacted, what is in the best interest of the community as a whole? I think that's the role that we're tasked with, and I think we're tasked with making some awkward and difficult decisions. This is probably one of those decisions, but on balance, I believe it's probably in the best interest of the whole of the community.
Any speakers against?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor,
Councillor White.
but also questions. So can I ask some questions of the officers, please? First question I have is the town plan. I just want to confirm the town plan is 400 metres. Who's going to answer this question, sir? Through the chair, through to the officers. Yep. Sorry. I just want to confirm that the town plan at this point has a 400 metre buffer zone.
Is this you, to the Director, and you'll ask the poll? Yeah.
Ready to answer the question,
Refer it to the Director and she can deal with it how she wishes.
Yes, thank you very much. Just before I'll ask the officer to speak to this, as you would know, Councillor Light, we have in train an amendment to the planning scheme to address the separation distance, the preferred separation distance, to reflect the fact that the current electromagnetic radiation limits provided by these facilities is very, very low, and as noted by Councillor Madden, in this case, this is 1.34% of the allowable maximum limit. But in terms of that separation distance, I'll just ask Mr Rice if that's okay, Mr Mayor, to discuss that. Thank you.
Through the Acting Mayor, Councillor, in response to your question, the
So I just wish to confirm that the nearest building to this structure is 80 metres to the north. And also wish to confirm on page 297, calculating EME levels, that with the proposed equipment, it seems to be in most cases in this matrix more than double or double of most of the current levels.
Just to clarify, you're saying it's a doubling of the emissions of the existing facility?
Yes.
That's correct, through the acting mayor. However, the emissions are still at 1.3% of an allowable 100% limit of emissions, as is regulated by the federal government.
All right.
So it still meets the...
My other question is there any current sites that have the level of equipment that this site is proposed to have? This might be a difficult question off the top of your head, but would those sites where there's multiple facility or multiple equipment, would they be within 80 metres of residence? Any of those, to your best of knowledge? Question on page 305, it says the subject site, unless I'm going blind, which I probably am, I can't see where it's marked where the tower is.
Through the Chair, Councillor, the tower is visible in the photo, it's not marked with an allocation. So if you follow from the bottom left-hand corner, the driveway, it goes centrally to the start of the lot.
So, sorry, behind that location, which is marked on the map for the benefit of everyone in the chamber, number 30, 28, 26, 3 and 6, would they be able to see the new tower proposed?
Through the Chair,
Or
Councillor, yes.
Through the Mayor, that's all the questions I have at this point of time. I will speak against when it's my turn.
Well, this is your turn now. We're looking for a speaker against now.
I'm sorry.
The mover and seconder both. Yes. Yep. So we're looking for a speaker against now.
I didn't want to be out of step. I'm sorry, Acting Mayor. Yes, I'll be certainly voting against this. I have some grave concerns on the locality of this, the impact it's made on residents. There's obviously a commercial arrangement, which was a question I was going to ask, but it's very obvious. There's a commercial arrangement for this tower to go onto a property, and that's a concern when there's such a massive impact to neighbours and around. I've looked at this, and I know that there is a real, can we say, argument for providing good telecommunications in the region. I appreciate that. And it's nearly like water, having obviously the internet and phone network. But we should never put the potential safety away from that benefit, and I really do have some grave concerns.
Is there a speaker for? Yes, Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. I'm speaking in favour of it, notwithstanding that I heard this morning's representations, indeed perhaps I'm speaking for it because I heard those, and because I was also invited out to another resident's property some months ago to look at the problem then. I understand their feelings and take into account their concerns, but in the end, it seems to me that we have to accept the expert advice in relation to emission levels, which is that it's 1.34% of an acceptable level, which is very minor. And notwithstanding that, I know people do have concerns about these emission levels. I simply come back to the fact that there's not much people in our position as a planning authority can do except to accept the expertise in this field. In relation to amenity and so on, again, there'll be some impact on amenity, but it is relatively marginal given that there's an existing tower there and this only adds a few metres, and given that the alternatives would mean an additional monopole in some other area, which of course would produce its own issues for those closer to that alternative site. So in those circumstances, while I sympathise with the residents, I'm going to vote in favour of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there another speaker against? Any further speakers in favour? In that case, Councillor Chapman, as mover, you have a right of reply because there was a speaker against the motion.
Yes, Acting Mayor, I just think, like with acting advice, that with the expert advice that Councillor Lewis did mention about, here we are, we've got companies that are willing to use the same tower instead of building another tower in another location, and all it's doing is adding 5 metres on the top, and with the radiation, we're well and truly 1.5 or something % to under. So I think that we'll be voting for this. Thank you.
In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All opposed? 2. It's carried 8 to 2. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Everard?
It'd be just great to see this this resource be used by the community and get people out and active on our beach. I was at a function yesterday where this topic came up, and it was from the Churches of Christ, and they are really looking forward to getting their residents, their friends, and their partners to down on the beach and get a bit more use into this map. So it's great.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to share those same comments, I think it's unfortunate that it hadn't been used as much as we would have hoped previously, so hopefully by going through this route, hopefully we'll see a lot more use of it.
Any further speakers in favour or questions? In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? All opposed? Carried unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 10.3.7, bounty bonus payments, and this is pages 315 to 318. Yeah, Councillor Hanson, you're happy to move the officer's recommendation, and Councillor Chapman, second it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This might take some selling to the landholders out there, but it is the right way to go. We had a very good discussion with Colsemic and Director Avery was there as well, and Councillor Madden, and it is the way to go. The biggest issues we have now is a lot of pig bounties are coming in from out of town, and so to redirect this money to things that are much more worthwhile is the way to go, and we can sell it, and we will sell it.
Any further speakers or questions? In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.8, changes to the 2017-2018 fees and charges for the Development and Community Directorate, pages 319. So there's an officer's recommendation on 319 to 320. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Everard. And seconded by Councillor Chapman. Did you wish to speak to it? No. Councillor Chapman? No. Any questions for the officers or speaker for or against? No. Okay, I put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.4.1, traffic calming for Shelcott Street, Toogoom, relating to residential concerns. And this is pages 324 to 337. Yeah. Councillor Light's moving. Councillor Chapman seconding. Did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I think the report speaks for itself. There is concern of certain residents there of the high traffic, proposed or suggested high traffic volumes and also speeds. However, the evidence doesn't portray that. I am very concerned if we went down the road of, and excuse the pun, of actually closing the road off, being, as we know, recently or some time ago, in emergency services, and I'm sure Councillor Taylor would speak to this. My really great concern is that you could have an emergency vehicle be responded to the wrong side of a road that's closed, and it will take several years for GPSs and local knowledge to address that. And yes, like Glenwood. So look, thank you to the officers to put this on the table. I have spoken to the CEO about this, and there obviously will be some further discussions, maybe on some very low-cost options as well, that we could look at. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Acting Mayor, I'd just like to thank the staff. The staff put a lot of input into this and virtually said earlier that it shouldn't be closed off, and so they've independently gone out now and got independent consultants to look at it, which has cost the Property Council another $10,000 and to come back with the same result. So I really think that it's a police issue. If these community people have got problems with people speeding, they need to get the number plates, pass the number plates on to the police. Thank you.
Further comments or questions? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.4.2, lock it or lose it signage, pages 338 to 342. Councillor Everard has indicated he will move this. Is there a seconder? Councillor Truscott will second it.
Yeah, the question when you read the officer's recommendation that council install lock it or lose it signage at 15 car parks along this financial year or in this financial year, doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that word there, along, should be deleted from the recommendation.
Which is, yeah, that's actually the resolution. So you're happy to delete the word along? Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Everard?
Oh, sorry, yeah, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Look, this is a great outcome. This outcome was actually, this request actually came up from our Community Policing Board, where it was QPS asked council to investigate this, and they just think it's a great reminder for our residents and visitors to lock it and lose it. Lock it or lose it, sorry. So this is a great step forward. These signs are in other tourism locations and other communities, and I think it's just anything to just give people that extra little bit of reminding to make sure their cars are locked and their vehicles are put out of, kept under secure conditions. So, yes, because sadly when the police do go around and they check a few cars and the policing volunteers, they do find a number of vehicles in our car parks right across the region that are not locked and the windows are rolled down. I myself come across a car the other day at a boat ramp that had the handbag sitting on the front seat and the back window was down. So this sign may stop actions like that.
Councillor Truscott has seconded. Any comments or people wish to speak? Yeah. You're speaking in favour of the motion? Yeah, Councillor Chapman?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to speak in favour of this motion. I think it's an awareness campaign that the council's doing, but just an instance, I was at a car park the other night and I pulled up and a gentleman said to me, make sure your car's locked, because two people just come along and checked all the car doors on all the cars. So it just goes to show you there was nothing pinched out of those cars, but if one of those cars was unlocked, there could have been things stolen, or even the car could have been stolen.
Anybody wish to speak against it? Any more in favour? In that case, I put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.5.1, the Wide Bay Water and Waste Services quarterly report for October to December, pages 343 to 359. Yeah, Councillor Madden, you wish to move? Is there a seconder? Councillor Taylor. Yes, Councillor Madden.
Yes, Mr Mayor, it's our Q2 quarterly report for Wide Bay Water. I just would draw to, or make note on page 348, something which might strike the general public as a bit weird. Under the revenue, rates and utility charges, year-to-date budget is $19,885,450. Year-to-date actual is $19,923,866. That appears to be an anomaly in the fact that this is a Q2 report which is to the end of December. However, that situation has arisen because our charges for that are actually charged on the first general rates notice in the first half of the year. So that explains why that looks to be somewhat odd, but it is an actual fact the way it is.
Any further speakers or questions? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Item 11.1 is proposed ban on lightweight plastic shopping bags, which has been moved by
Mr Mayor, can I just point out in highlight, due to conflict of interest, I do have a business, we do use plastic bags.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily disagreeing with anything or agreeing, but I think in the light of that, I should excuse myself from this particular one. Okay?
You'll be declaring a perceived conflict?
Perceived conflict of interest, yeah. Thank you.
You got that, Marlene? Yeah. Okay. So this is a motion of Councillor Truscott. Is there a seconder? Councillor Taylor, you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'd like to applaud the state government for their initiative in looking to ban lightweight plastic shopping bags. This motion, whilst I probably didn't provide an actual title for it, it's not really specifically about shopping bags, because it's more to ensure council's compliance with the upcoming launch of the legislation, to ensure that council is compliant and active on this, and to ensure that council is doing every bit that we can, which I believe we are, but it'd be good to know for sure that we are as well in doing our part to look after the environment. There's a number of ways and methods in which we can do that, and one of the items which is mentioned in there is about potential for partnerships with the community to reduce the reliance on single-use plastic items such as plastic bags, coffee cups and drink cups. Things like single-use plastics and takeaway coffee cups do enormous harm to the environment, and I'd like to know that, ultimately the goal, I believe, would be to work with the community to try and create initiatives to see a reduction in the usage of those sort of items, and I don't believe that we should be in a position to encourage the community to do that until we can know for certain that council is doing the right thing in that regard. So I'd like to know that we are, to work towards that goal, and to then work on a system where we can educate and raise awareness and encourage and work with the community in that line.
Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I draw attention to the fact that while the title refers it to as a proposed ban of lightweight plastic shopping bags, it's actually an impending ban rather than a proposed. It's actually the state government have enacted legislation that will come into effect on the 1st of July 2018. So this motion isn't about this council considering a proposal to ban lightweight plastic bags. It is actually determining whether or not we are compliant with legislation that is coming forward on the 1st of July. And further, identifying that the state government has identified benchmarks that we can either try to strive to achieve or to even develop better practices than what's being considered. So I think this is a good time for us to consider these options and to look at ways that we can certainly be better custodians of the land in which we live in, and particularly considering that we are a biosphere. We have some of the most pristine natural environments in the world, and anyone who's ever gone out and heard talks about the environment, particularly on the Great Sandy Straits, and the distinction between a plastic bag and a jellyfish, which turtles eat, is very hard to determine in the water, particularly for turtles. So I think it's a good time to have those discussions, and I applaud Councillor Truscott for bringing it forward.
Any comments or questions for the officers? Speaks for or against? No? In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously, 9-0. We can ask Councillor Light to come back in. The next item is page 361, motion moved by Councillor Everard relating to potential parking solutions for the Riverheads boat ramp. Is there a seconder? Councillor Chapman. Councillor Everard?
Yeah, thank you, Acting Mayor Seymour. Look, for as long as I've lived on the Fraser coast, which is coming up to 30 years, the land-based infrastructure at Riverheads has not been sufficient. When the crabs are on, when the prawns are on, you cannot get a car park anywhere near the boat ramp. And I think it's well and truly past time that something was done to improve the land-based infrastructure down there. We've got a great new facility going in. I was down there yesterday having a look at the new facility, and the local residents and Harvey Bay residents who were there when I was there were very, very upbeat and excited about it. But the question has been raised many times yesterday was, when will something be done about the parking? Look, I do understand that the Burham Heads land-based parking, it was a well over a 20-year project. When my first business was Burham Heads Butchery, and we had sausage sizzles to raise a bit of money for that infrastructure back in those days, and that took 20 years. So look, just looking forward to a report coming back with a bit of clear direction for the community, so we can start the discussion with the higher levels of government. Personally, I think that this infrastructure, it's tourism-based infrastructure. People want to go fishing, they'll go on holidays and go fishing. So looking forward to a partnership with the higher levels of government to make this happen.
Councillor Chapman, a seconder.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I highlighted this the other day about the Burham Heads boat ramp. The state government has put a lot of money in towards doing up the boat ramp, but at the end of the day, it's to use the boat ramp, you must have a boat trailer and a vehicle, and when you put your boat in the water, you must be able to park that somewhere, and that's the biggest problem we've got out there at the moment. This is really to I really think that we're behind on the 8 ball with this, because the boat ramp's going to be finished and this council's going to cop a lot of flack over not having car parks there. I can see it happening now, and I just think that we've got to think very seriously on looking after that area out there, because we get tourists come here and say what a lovely place it is, and then they go and put their boat in, and then when they pull it out they can't find somewhere to park. Then they go and have to park in an illegal car park somewhere, and then worry all day they're going to be fined when they come back. It isn't a real good thing, so I will be supporting it.
Any councillor wish to speak against the motion? In favour of the motion? Yes, councillor Madden. No? Okay. Otherwise, yeah, I'll put the motion. Oh, councillor Truscott.
Thank you. Yeah, just to speak in favour of it, I think, yeah, it is a very difficult situation, parking there. I've also been out there just recently and seen the construction, and it looks great. But yeah, I've seen reports from people and heard reports from people about the difficulties, especially for elderly, if they have to park up along the top of the hill, to walk down to the ramp and that there, it is quite difficult. So if there is something that we can do in investigating to find a report to find options to make it better, fully support that.
No further speakers. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next section of the agenda is questions on notice. We'll deal with Councillor Taylor's question in general business. Is that right? Yeah. Item 13, consideration of items placed on the agenda with the consent of the Mayor. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, Councillor Light has a question on development, on a development matter. No, he wants to put it as a question. We'll leave it till, we'll cover it in general business. Thank you. Thank you. Consideration of items placed on the agenda with the consent of the Mayor. There is none. Late items 16.1.1 in the supplementary agenda is pages 459 to 461, the Deputy Chairperson of the Local Disaster Management Group. So that we need to appoint a councillor to be the Deputy Chairperson of this group. Is there somebody who wishes to move a motion? Is there a seconder? Councillor Sanderson.
Just for clarity, I think it's appropriate that I offer the position to the acting mayor, and if you don't wish to take the position, then I'm more than happy to take on the role. So I'm open for you to advise whether or not it's your intention.
I think we should fit the skills to the roles, and you and Councillor Light are best suited to these two roles. So I certainly, if you're happy to fill the role, I'll defer to you.
Yes.
Otherwise, the motion is appoint Councillor Stuart Taylor to the role of Deputy Chairperson, Local Disaster Management Group, update the Local Disaster Management Group plan to reflect this appointment. So that's moved by Councillor Light, seconded Sanderson. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for that opportunity. It's going to come from the heart here that previous events around this Deputy Chair role, in hindsight, you know, we could have gone down to a different road, but we won't look in the rear vision mirror. I have all the confidence in the world in Councillor Taylor's ability. It seems that every time we have an issue, I'm away, if that's saying something, and Councillor Taylor stepped up to the mark with Councillor Everard at the time and did an exceptional job. Look, there is no secret to the fact that sometimes Councillor and Taylor don't see eye to eye on a number of different matters, and that's democracy. But when it comes to this area, we fully cooperate, we have a great understanding of it, and we work very well together. So certainly I nominate Councillor Taylor as 100% and really look forward to work with him.
Councillor Sanderson, a seconder.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Just concur with Councillor Light's words and congratulate Councillor Taylor on taking on this role, and I do agree, I think he'll do an exceptional job to help keep our region safe in any times of any disaster. So well done, Stuart.
Any further speakers? In that case, I put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. The next item is item 16.1.2, page 462, alternative for acting mayor. That's in the supplementary agenda as well. So this is in the case where I'm incapacitated or temporarily unavailable, somebody, according to this motion, could perform the role of acting mayor.
Mr Acting Mayor, I I seek to nominate someone, and it has nothing to do with the ordinary item 16.1.1 that's just proceeded. It just so happens that they're on the same agenda. My nomination for this position, is Councillor Rolf Light. Firstly, I think it's important to say that there's no question in my mind that any person in this room could take on this role. I think it's not a matter of competency, but certainly there's no question that we are navigating unprecedented waters and times there's some challenges ahead. I'm confident that Councillor Light will be able to work through some of those challenges with you as acting mayor, and we'll be able to present a strong force within the council to say that we are a council committed to delivering for the community, regardless of our positions or some of the conflicts that we may have had in the past. There is no question that every single one of us is committed to this community, the Fraser Coast community, all its residents, and I think this is a demonstration to that community that we can work as a team. And I've certainly seen, even hearing Councillor Light speak on radio in public, presenting his disappointment at the former mayor being dismissed, but a willingness to move forward, and that's what we need in this position right now. And I commend him for his service.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak as seconder?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. I have full confidence in Councillor Light. He's shown exceptional leadership skills in the past 6 years, and his passion for the region is not to be questioned. So I think he's a very good choice for the position, and I fully back it.
Any further speakers? Perhaps I'll just comment that, like Councillor Taylor said, this is unprecedented times, and I really have appreciated the confidence and trust that my colleagues have placed in me so far, and myself and Councillor Light will continue in this role during this caretaker period, such that it is. I certainly do not come here wanting to change things as acting mayor or implement widespread policy changes. I haven't sought or am not taking an increased pay level. I don't even view myself as first among equals. At this time, we have to pull together, and I know that Councillor Light and I are on the same page in that, in terms of the community's looking to us for leadership and a bit of stability, and I really appreciate Councillor Light's assistance with that. The officer's recommendation is on page 467, that in accordance with sections 169 and 170 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, Council adopt the amended budget for 2017-2018 as detailed in attachment 1. Now we're moving a budget. Have we got the resolutions right? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. Councillor Everett, you're happy to move? Is there a seconder? Oh, Councillor Light? Yep. You want to speak? Yep. Councillor Light? Yep. Any questions? Comments? Maybe it would be good if you just quickly outline what the effect of the amendment is. Yeah.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, Mr Mayor. There hasn't been... The council still enjoys a very healthy surplus position. In terms of the operational budget, we've had a decrease in revenue of about 590, operational revenue by about 590,000, with anticipated increases in general rate revenue, water consumption revenue, fees and charges, offset by an expected reduction in the financial assistance grant, for the FAGS grant, which comes from the government. And this is one of those grants that impacts us every year, depending upon whether the government wants to pay it in advance or not pay it in advance. The operational expenditures increased by $3.4 million, mainly due to transfer of budgets from capital expenditure operational, following a review of the makeup and content of the capital budgets. There's a number of other minor adjustments that to do with timing and receipt of capital grants and developer contributions. With respect to the capital budget, Mr Acting Mayor, there has been, traditionally the Council has adopted its budget for capital budget for the year, and then has adopted a large carryover from the previous years for works that haven't been done. So we have had some capital budgets transferred operational to the operational budget. We've had some works for Queensland funding, and overall it's contributed to a $28.7 million increase in capital works. The long-term financial model continues to see us operating in a very financially sustainable position, and the financial future for Fraser Coast Regional Council is sound.
Thank you. There's no further speakers or questions. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. The next item is item 16.1.4, rating methodology. That's pages 529 to 536.
Mr Mayor, Acting Mayor, I'm sorry, I wish to move that. With it, I have an amendment as well,
Yeah.
minor amendment.
Okay, do you want to read out the amendment?
Okay, so the amendment, sorry, it's a lot of paperwork today. On page, no. Sorry, yes, sorry. On page on the second page of, because it's not numbered on mine.
No, we've got the draft.
Okay, so above number 4, which is on my second page, item C, which it says general rates increase will be capped to a maximum of 45%. I wish to take out the maximum of 45%. It should just read, hopefully, general rates increase will be capped, and that will be determined by future budget meetings.
A lot less than 45%.
It could be, yes, very much so. Yeah. That's the intent.
So delete to a maximum of 45%.
Correct.
So are you seconding it? So move Councillor Light, seconded Councillor Madden. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I had an amendment to move, and I'm just wondering whether you want me to move that at this stage or after Councillor Light speaks. I propose to move an amendment which I have circulated to everyone. I'm happy to move it now. I'm also happy to move it after Councillor Light speaks if he wishes.
When did you circulate it, sorry?
At 10:01.
Okay, when we're in here, yeah.
Yes, you have a copy. All councillors and directors and
We'll just have to assess whether it is an amendment of the motion or if it changes it sufficiently that it's a contrary motion. So,
it's on, in my submission, it's an amendment.
So, just for the purposes of, if I can perhaps you might want to get
Yeah.
Councillor Lewis to...
yeah, perhaps it will be better if you move the amendment now, yes.
Fine, thank you.
Oh, and see if they agree to it or not.
Sure.
And then you can formally move
The
it.
amendment is that paragraph B, and of course, when I refer to paragraph B, I'm referring to the officer's recommendation on page 530, paragraph 3. 3B reads the differential rating categories, etc., be in accordance with attachment 1. Okay. My amendment is that paragraph B be amended by adding at the end of the word attachment 1, subject to changes to provide that non-owner occupied residences be the same as owner occupied residences, bracket categories 2A and 2B, close bracket, and that category 8 be amended in each case to provide for a minimum rate equivalent to 60% of cat 1A in lieu of 47.5%. So in effect, the amendment is to do a bit of minor fiddling, well, minor or major as you may interpret, but a bit of fiddling to the attachment which sets out the percentages of the base residential rate in those categories 2A, which is residential non-owner occupied urban, 2B, residential non-owner occupied non-urban, and in the various multi-residential categories of 8A through to 8S.
I need clarification here, Acting Mayor. I've got an amended motion, which we've put forward, but now we have another one. So I'm a bit confused because...
And the motion's been moved and seconded. If Councillor Lewis wants to move an amendment, he needs a seconder.
So, Mr Mayor, Councillor Light's motion wasn't an amended motion. He actually put a motion, which was different to the council's motion. The proposed motion from Councillor Lewis needs to be determined whether it's an amended motion or whether it's an alternative, whether he's foreshadowing an alternative motion. Simply because, and whether it's an amended motion or alternative motion goes to the substance of the motion itself. Does it change? Does it retain the identity of the original motion? And Councillor Lewis was unclear whether it's a minor change or a major change. So if it's an amended motion, an amendment to the motion will be in terms of which retain the identity of the original motion and does not directly negate the motion. It's not negative to the motion. My understanding is that this is an amendment. This is an alternative motion.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Well, it's my ruling.
Mr Mayor, sorry, just to throw another spanner in the works, I'd like to foreshadow another alternative motion.
We can only deal with one.
Well, that's why I'm just trying to raise it to...
Yeah. So if I just like Councillor Lewis, your amendment is changing the percentages in some of the categories.
Yeah, yes, Mr Acting Mayor, that's the substance of my amendment. It's not a negation of the motion. The identity of the motion is very much retained. It's simply that that I am changing or seeking to change a couple of the percentages by not particularly significant amounts in terms of the substance of the motion. I mean, I'm not suggesting a negation of the motion would be that we don't rate, that we don't rate properties at all, or something of that nature. Something which simply tinkers with percentages is the classic definition, I would have thought, or the classic example of an amendment. The identity of the motion is fine. The purpose of the motion is to lay out some parameters for the rates methodology, so that the staff can attend to calculations in accordance with that. I'm simply changing a few of the numbers, only a few of the numbers in the table that forms just a part of that methodology.
So
I would submit it's clearly an amendment, not a negation.
My ruling is I agree with Councillor Lewis. This doesn't negate it, and this is simply an amendment of the motion. If we are going to debate it, you would need a seconder, though. Well, I don't think we do, but do we? We don't. Yes. Yeah. No. Is there a seconder to the proposed amendment?
It may be. Can I just throw a question at the Director of Innovation Services? So, sorry, Director. Look, well, my concern comes down to in the rating structure rating structure principles on attachment 1, and that's category 1B, non-owner occupied urban, the 80%, the island levy. So my question comes in there is with the focus on Fraser Island, like there's been no consultation with those residents over there?
Through the Chair, no, there was no direct consultation with the residents on Fraser Island. The rating reference group, of which Councillor Light and Councillor Madden... Oh, sorry. My apologies. Councillor Light was a member and participated in that rating reference group. They did consider the definition of non-urban, and Fraser Island was part of their consideration in coming up with the recommendations for those rating categories. It's noted that the the principle that was adopted for those non-urban categories is that the minimum general rate will be at a value less than the general rate for the urban properties. The rate in the dollar applied to the category where the valuation is leads the rates to be in excess of the minimum will be applied at the same rate as the urban properties. That is the recommendation. There was quite a substantial amount of modelling done by a consultant and engaging with that rating reference group to come up with that recommendation, and we have carried those forwards into this report.
So, look, my concern is that, like, we've had the internal groups, but there's been no discussion with residents on the island, and like a number of those residents have contacted me and they're raving grave concerns about it. So, look, I can't support it in the present form. But thank you. I'm happy to second Councillor Lewis's.
Okay, so just so we're all clear that we're then under about 17.11 of the standing orders. This now becomes, because there's a mover and a seconder, proposed amendment. If it wins, it becomes the motion. If it loses, then we go back to the original motion. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, if there's any question. Yep.
Yeah. The amendment as proposed by Councillor Lewis is in relation to investment properties. My family trust, investment in non-owner occupied, or investment if you want to put it that way. My family trust and my super fund own a number of non-owner occupied properties. I feel a bit conflicted about debating this issue, so I think if we're going to debate this amendment, I'd like to leave the room for this part of the debate.
Is that an interesting comment?
Unless unless you consider that that's...
We should give people a week and call this meeting. This isn't right. I'll just maybe put it out there that perhaps this requires more than this consideration. I mean, people are trying to memorise what you said, Councillor Lewis. This might require us to defer this matter and actually have a special meeting so that we have a week's preparation. I'm not sure that this amendment that you propose to move gives us suitable time to consider it. I'm not even sure what the amendment is.
Can I please make a comment on the Mayor's acting Mayor's comment? I agree with that. I think that we're just, with respect to Councillor Lewis, we've got to have all the facts, and one of us will be wrong or one of us could be right. But I think that considering that of the, can we say, the impact, what this will do, I think that for the sake of it, a special meeting might be appropriate. By the way, I would love to speak to this, but maybe not now.
So right now we have a motion that's been put and seconded, and then an amendment that's been put and seconded. And a foreshadowed. Yes. Yeah, so if you guys withdraw your amendment, they can withdraw their motion, and then we can put it on the table and call a special meeting in a week's time to deal with it in a more considered, given the significant impacts of any decision we make on this right now. When I didn't see your email at 10:01, so I don't know what the amendment is.
Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable to do that. I mean, it was something I did discuss the other day, so I don't know that it would come as a great surprise. In fact, I've dropped one of the matters I was going to object to. But I'm perfectly happy to withdraw this if it will facilitate laying on the table. I do simply mention, for a matter of practicality, that I'm away most of next week, so if it was the week after, it would be a lot better for me. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, so just so I can make sure I understand it for the purposes of assisting the person taking the minutes, because it is getting a little bit confusing. My understanding is that the council is giving consent to Councillor Lewis and Councillor Light to withdraw their motions, and that you're proposing an alternative motion, or you're moving a motion, that the matter be referred back to staff for further consideration and at a future council meeting.
Yeah. And on the understanding that this has to be done rather soon because it's for the budget this year, so it's not going to come back at that. Yeah. We couldn't leave it to the March meeting.
Well, I imagine, I'd like to think, Mr. Mayor, that we'll be having discussions on Monday about this.
Yeah, and if people have to attend by telelink, if they're away, they could. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification, this was brought up in the reference user group. It was mentioned about doing this, and I feel it very hard, and I think you're going the right track, is that it come back to the council, because this is going to change figures and everything like that, so we really need to know the full grounds.
Okay, so just to be clear, you withdraw your amendment, you withdraw the motion, you place a motion that you find on the table and you second the motion?
Oh, I thought you were moving the motion. No. We'd be referred back to start, but later, that's fine.
Yep.
Okay? Yep. Everyone understand? Yes. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. All right.
We've all told about that, so couldn't get away with it easy, George.
All right. That concludes the items, unless there are any more supplementary items that came through. That concludes the items for this section of the agenda. So we're going to general business. Councillor Taylor had something he wanted to bring up in general business.
That's correct. So I did have a question on notice. They raised the, some clarity in relation to the Esplanade, particularly in Point Vernon. The question was to the CEO, could you update council on, one, changes in the past 12 months to the mowing and maintenance schedule for the Point Vernon foreshore and Esplanade area, and the rationale for changes to the schedule?
I think the CEO is referring that to the director. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for the for the question. I'm aware that there has been some discussion about this matter, and I'm happy to provide some clarification around the issue. There hasn't been any significant changes to Council's overall mowing schedule in the Point Vernon area within the last 12 months. However, there have been some variations to areas along the Esplanade in a particular location between about 180 and 140, the Esplanade. And this is largely due to erosion problems, and in order to reduce mechanical damage to existing tree trunks and roots from mowing activities. Reduction of mowing in the targeted areas will also allow for the natural regeneration or regrowth of the next generation of trees within that area. Existing trees are actually of the same age, and what this means is that they will die at the same time, become unsound at the same time, if future recruitment of replacement trees is not planned for and allowed for now. There are also some regeneration works being undertaken on the western side of Easter Park and from Gattaca's Bay to Spence Street to prevent erosion and damage caused by illegal vehicle access. All of the works described are in keeping with Council's adopted foreshore enhancement action plans, and these date back to 2012 and in fact are all on Council's website. The objective for this particular area states that vegetation should be managed to preserve views, but also to reduce actively mown areas and investigate additional natural restoration where appropriate. So I suppose just in summary, there is an area where the officers used to mow significantly around trees and areas where there's minor erosion occurring, and in keeping with this foreshore enhancement action plan, the officers are pulling back from mowing to that extent to allow for some regeneration and regrowth as described. It doesn't change any of the scheduled mowing or approach to the other areas of the Esplanade, and certainly those areas that are maintained as lawn will continue to be maintained as lawn, and there is certainly a commitment to ensuring that space is available for recreation, picnicking, walking, etc., etc. This is a particular strategy in order to respond to an identified erosion and vegetation concern. It will also be closely monitored by the officers to ensure that it's properly kept in check. I hope that addresses the concerns.
I note the response was read. Is it possible to have that response tabled with the question? So I'd be seeking that be tabled. Yeah.
You're moving a motion that the response be tabled?
Yeah, I'm seeking that response. I understand some of that was verbatim, but the core will then be on record for any inquiry for later on.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded, Councillor Lewis, that the officer's response be tabled in the minutes. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Councillor Light also had an item for general business.
Yes, I do. On notice, which I have actually sent, and I apologise for a couple of different copies. I've sent out to Marlene and to all councillors, and I apologise I haven't sent it to the directors, this latest one. I'll read it out anyway. Question on notice. Can the CEO provide a report on how suitable screening can be constructed and planned to block the current development on Drury Lane from the residents of Yarrowleigh Circuit, Dundarran? The residents have formed a small community group and asked that a 4-metre levee bank to be constructed on the western side of the lagoon with a planting of large lily-pilly trees or similar to provide a similar screenscape that was originally there. The community has asked Council, as part of the initial DA conditions of consent, include a 15-metre buffer zone at the rear of the properties as well as the side of the first property on the northern side. This would assist with the space needed to provide the requested levee. The committee has advised that it believes there is a 9-metre buffer zone to the public open space on the western edge of the lagoon. Could the CEO also comment on when the construction might take place, given the residents have been very tolerant and that part of this development is a council infrastructure?
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Happy to take that on notice.
Yep, that's it. Question on notice.
Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to initially thank Director Parsons for the response I received last night regarding the question I asked at last meeting regarding the transit centre, the Maryborough Transit Centre for the bus relocation. It has provided information on the what's going to be happen future-wise for the long term of it, but I think also what needs to be addressed still was the short term. Was that was part of the motion, I believe, at the time, was that there be some consideration to in the short term moving the transit centre location from buses at the Lennox Street transit centre where it currently is at the back of Station Square to McDowell car park over here. So if that could be addressed. Secondly, a question I'd like to raise without notice this morning was we had, I think her name was Jenna Tennant from the Maryborough State High School speak this morning, and I'd like to acknowledge what she said and to raise that concern. I understand the school has received some funding which may assist them in making some changes, but just to put it on the record basically that Council is doing everything that we can to assist with Department of Transport and Main Roads, with the Department of Education, working with the school, and to see what can be done to try and fix the situation with the crossing. I finished my schooling there in the year 2000, and it was an issue back then. And so 18 years later, it's not going to get any better. And it is difficult crossing the road, and as the student explained, there's not much space in that traffic island for students crossing the road. So I think if we could note that and to see what Council can do to assist the school in improving the situation.
Further items, Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Acting Mayor. I just got an email that was sent to me this morning from the, it's the second round of the 2016 census, and it says that here that the Fraser Coast population grew from 2006 to 2016 1.8%. And the thing that it sort of pointed out to me here, the biggest employing sector locally was health and social assistance at 19%. Maryborough is the main employment location, as 30.7% of the employment comes out of Maryborough and 29.6% comes out of Pyolba, Eli Waters. So those statistics show that Maryborough is still one of our major employment areas, and that's what we should never let go. Oh, this actually come from the UDIA this morning. Thank you.
All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Next one is item 15.5. It, I understand, is moved by Councillor Hanson. Seconded by Councillor Light, Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. All in favour?
I'm just posting this on hashtag political news, FC Journal.
That's carried. The next item is item 15.6, Web Rock Sewer Relining Program, increased scope of works. Page 440, moved Councillor Mattern, seconded Councillor Lewis. Did either mover or seconder wish to speak? No. Any, all in favour? Any opposed? Carries unanimously. The next item is item 15.7, options for utilisation of Council's environmental levy funds. This is moved Councillor Lewis, seconded Councillor Chapman. Yeah, as per amended, yeah. Did you wish to speak to it as the mover or yourself, Dennis? No? Any other speakers? I put it, all in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The final item is the resolution to prepare a rural residential land strategy. And this is moved Councillor Everard, seconded Councillor Madden. Did you wish to speak? No? No? Any other speakers? I think that's a great idea. Yep. It's very, I put the motion, all in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Mr. CEO, do we have any other items on the agenda? Okay, that concludes the agenda, and I close the meeting at, what time?
It's 12:30.
Close the meeting at 12:30.